Hey everyone, I'm Majiin and welcome in to World Tour Weekly, your one-stop shop for all competitive Flesh and Blood news. With the Super Slam World Premiere in the rearview mirror and classic constructed events not kicking off until this weekend, we're going to spend this episode talking about my personal views on how good the new heroes are, a couple of announcements, and some upcoming events. Let's get into it. First off, pre-release for Super Slam events have been taking place over the last week, and it's been a ton of fun to watch players crack packs and try out the format. So far, the record for biggest attack I've seen in a pre-released event is 27 with a confidence token. So if you can beat that, let me know in the comments. Alright, now I want to jump straight into talking about the new heroes because I know that's what you all want to hear about. Remember that this is going to be my opinion based on the limited amount of testing with and against these heroes I've been able to do. We're still pre-week 1 of release, so this is going to be some pretty early takes. Take it with a grain of salt. Okay, now with that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about the new heroes in today's Metagame Minute. Alright, let's start with Toughnut Bumbling Hulkster. Just like it did in Super Slam Limited, I was pleasantly surprised with how Toughnut played in actual games. Obviously, 3 intellect is a pretty strong drawback, but he's got incredible defensive plays, and Rock can give you some pretty good value on offense as well. In fact, when playing slower decks into him, I found myself constantly getting outvalued on a turn-by-turn basis. The versions of the deck that I'm seeing tend to be a little bit more defensive in nature, which isn't surprising considering his hero ability makes toughness tokens. The deck looks to consistently churn out value with toughness and vigor tokens from things like his hero ability, card effects, and clash cards. On the flip side, if you're able to activate Rock, you convert cards into offensive pressure at incredibly above the standard rate. This deck makes great use of new tools like Good Natured Brutality and Dig In to make it tough to get past its defensive wall. It seems like strategies that are a bit slower and send larger attacks struggle into the Revered Brute because he's just so damn good at blocking large amounts. Things like Dominate and Confidence tokens can help players push through, but because the Toughness tokens load up on the first action that blocks, it's not quite as good as you'd want it to be. As a trade-off, he seems like he struggles a lot more into the low-to-the-ground, go-wide decks that don't let him take advantage of toughness tokens. This would be decks like Syndra and Slippy, for example. He also doesn't do anything incredibly powerful on a turn-by-turn basis. Strong average value across multiple turns is really his main selling point. So if there is a deck that outvalues him, as hard as that may be, it might be difficult for him to deal with them. I expect Toughnut to be kind of okay in the current meta. He's going to have some really good matchups, he's going to have some really poor matchups. Alright, next up is the Reviled Brute, KO Underhanded Cheat. Alright, now this one is a little bit more difficult than the others, not just because it's kind of hard to build a deck for him, but mostly because the original KO is getting a lot more attention from the player base. Yep, that's right, KO Armed and Dangerous is back big time, but we're going to talk about him later. For now, let's stick to the Super Slam heroes. New KO's ability is quite strong and lets him play a lot of blues that brutes generally wouldn't get to take advantage of because of their low power. It seems to me like this KO won't play quite like the brutes that we're used to. I can see him using cards like Rowdy Locals and Mocking Blow to get a lot of value out of cards with low base power, then using his hero ability to essentially double dip on value. With all the new tools that Brute is getting in this set, you could probably build him as some sort of standard Blood Rush Bellows type Brute hero, but then you're probably just building a worse KO Armed and Dangerous, so I think something new is required here. A card I'm really excited to see what players do with is Outside Interference, which has an effect we haven't really seen in Flesh and Blood before. I tend to love toolbox type cards, and it seems like this one offers you a lot of flexibility when you draw it. You could grab a finisher like Bully Tactics or a strong one card play like Mocking Blow. I will admit that I have the least amount of testing with the new KO compared to the other heroes in the Super Slam set, so I could be completely off. With that being said, I don't expect KO Underhanded Cheat to be a super competitively viable deck right out of the gates. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if he continues to gain meta share as players get a little bit more used to him, but I expect people to gravitate towards KO Armed and Dangerous, at least initially. Okay, next up are the Guardians, starting with Pleiades, Superstar. Pleiades is obviously important to LSS. She's kind of the face of the Super Slam set, and she's releasing with an armory deck. She's also the only one of the new heroes to have a signature weapon. Out of all of the new heroes, she definitely feels the most complete with a ton of tools at her disposal. The question is, will that be enough? I think anyone who has played some games with her can tell you that she does some pretty powerful things. Setting up for large plays like Active Glory and sending things through with confidence tokens can be really strong in a lot of matchups. My question is whether or not that will be good enough into the faster decks in the format like Syndra and KO. Obviously, as a Guardian, she has access to tons of tools that help her with the lower to the ground aggressive decks. The issue is that in her current deck list, so many of the slots are dedicated to the Aura of Suspense plan that it might be difficult to fit them in. I might sound a little bit pessimistic on her, but honestly, I think she's going to be pretty strong right out of the box and probably only get better from there. My biggest question marks for her have more to do with the meta around her than whether or not she's good in a vacuum. The cards I've been most impressed with so far in the deck are Turning Point, which isn't just a strong defensive tool, but also helps you set up confidence tokens for the next turn, and Cries of Encore, which can set up some insane, tremendous value plays if it hits. What happens next has also been incredibly impressive, but it's a little bit harder to rate than other cards because sometimes it does nothing, and sometimes it completely changes how the deck operates. I would definitely keep an eye on this one. Alright, and I saved my favorite for last. It's time for Lyath Goldmane, Vile Savant. First of all, playing with 5 intellect makes me feel like I have 5 intellect. You have so many more options on a turn-by-turn basis, it actually makes going back to other heroes once you've played him a little bit tough. There seems to be 2 different styles of deck for the Reviled Guardian hero floating around right now. The first being a more aggressive list that uses a lot of pumps to push through strong zero-cost attacks. The second is a more defensively styled deck that uses a lot of life gain and prevention effects to get around Lyath's having ability. Cards like Fiddler's Green and Steadfast take advantage of his 5 intellect while not losing any value to his hero text. I'm not sure which version is going to end up being the preferred one with the player base, but I wouldn't be surprised if some amalgamation of the two ends up being the strongest version. I do think he's going to have some issues with different decks depending on whether he leans aggressive or defensive. Of all the new heroes, I do think this one will probably take the longest for the player base to reach a consensus on how he should be played. All that being said, I have a lot of hope for the hero in the future. Alright, that was an incredibly long metagame minute, but I had a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about. Speaking of me talking a lot, I'm going to be casting Calling Shizuoka this weekend. So if you want to see the first CC event with the new Super Slam cards, make sure you come check it out. That's not the only event of the weekend though. We also have Battle Hardened Guadalajara, which is Classic Constructed, and Battle Hardened Paris, which is Team Classic Constructed. I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on all of these events as it's our first glimpse into the new Super Slam meta, and I want to be properly prepared for the start of the ProQuest season. If I had to take a guess right now on the big winners and losers from Super Slam, I'd have to say that Florian, Verdance, KO, and Syndra are probably pretty well situated at the beginning of this meta. Obviously, this is subject to change as the format moves along. I also think that my estimation for the new heroes will probably continue to rise as we get a little bit more used to them. But for now, those would be my picks for the current best decks. Don't let this fool you though, I think a ton of decks are capable of winning tournaments in this current format. It seems like it's shaping up to be a rather broad meta with players having a lot of options. Moving away from Classic Constructed, we also have quite a few events to look forward to on the Living Legend side of things. With Battle Hardened Shizuoka, Hamburg, Houston, Sydney, and Baltimore all showcasing the high power format. These will likely be players' best chance to get reps in time for Worlds. If neither of those formats are your jam, we also have a little bit more information regarding the Silver Age events, with a video showcasing that we can expect Battle Hardens in the format at Valencia, Seattle, and Hong Kong. If you're not familiar with Silver Age, you may have heard of it called Project Blue, a format following in the footsteps of Commoner, restricting some of the higher rarity cards. If you haven't played Commoner or anything like that, then just take my word for it, it's very fun. The video lets us know that we can expect some more information on the format in October, so keep an eye out for that. If you've been on the official Flesh and Blood website recently, you may have known that it's gotten a bit of a facelift. The redesign is pretty cool, and I'm definitely a big fan of the Hero Finder page, which I think is a great resource for anyone new looking to come into the game. Alright, that's all I got for this episode. Make sure you tune into the Calling this weekend. I'm Majiin, and I'll see you next time on World Tour Weekly.